Welcome, everyone. Today we're joined by Armen Marsoobian, Professor of Philosophy at Southern Connecticut State University. Armen, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So I understand you just attended this year's Armenian Society of Fellows Conference in the town of Dilijan in northern Armenia. The conference brought together hundreds of scholars to discuss ways to develop Armenia's research and education potential. What else can you tell us about it?
Well, it was, I think, one of the most important gatherings of Armenian brain power, to put it simply, from around the world in the diaspora and from Armenia. The range of scholarship abilities, not just in academia, but also in the business community and the investment community, bringing all them together in one setting is very important, because there's a certain kind of synergy that's created. So it was an experience for me that makes me much more optimistic when I see that kind of work that Armenians are doing around the world and how they're trying to focus it on improving things in Armenia and creating a sustainable, viable country.
And I know you have an extensive background in genocide studies, and you've previously helped develop genocide studies courses back in the United States. What has your experience been teaching the Armenian genocide to an American audience, and what have you taken away from that?
Well, it's been interesting because over the years I've taught it at my university, Southern Connecticut State University. I've also taught at Columbia University in their graduate program, and more recently I've been involved in the human rights program at the University of Connecticut. I've yet to have an Armenian student in all three venues. Well, at Columbia I did have a couple of Armenians, but I mean, my experience has been very positive. There have been a number of students, especially in my university, that have come out of it with a broad sort of view of the human situation and can understand it in terms of the history of these examples of mass violence. Because my course, except for Columbia, my course at my university has been much more comparative. We do the Armenian Genocide, the Holocaust. We also do Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Native American genocides. Sometimes we alter that. There's a lot there to cover. I don't teach it historically, even though they get the background of those genocides. The students are exposed to the arts and literature, film, poetry, memoir, in response to and the aftermath of these genocides. So I find that venue, that approach to it is more impactful on the students. And I've never in any of my other philosophy courses, other courses, have I had students so involved in the material. So for me, personally, it's very uplifting. Teaching the course, of course, it's not an uplifting subject matter. So I have to do it very, very carefully. But I think what it does ultimately for the students, it certainly puts Armenia on the map for them, because most of them never heard of the Armenian Genocide. They certainly heard of the Holocaust. They might have heard of some of the others, Rwanda. But it certainly makes them aware. And I know some of them have gone on to do work in NGOs and are really committed to the idea of human rights.
You've also organized exhibitions telling the story of your family's experience during the genocide around the world, including in both Armenia and in Turkey. I see you also work closely with Turkish minority rights NGOs. What has the reception been of your work in Turkey, and what can you tell us about that?
Well, I started to work there in 2010, around 2010. and it really gained momentum in the early part of that decade. And it was a period where there was an opening. Erdogan was not as authoritarian as he is now. The civil society was opening up. So I happened to be there at the right time, and I met some very forward-looking people. Chief of whom is Osman Kavala, who has now been in prison for 4.5 years. He'll be this coming fall. He'll be 5 years. He was instrumental in all 4 exhibitions I had in Turkey, working with other people. Some of them, unfortunately, are also in prison or in exile. Some of them still are carrying on their work. I think I can't say my work has made an impact, but certainly I got a lot of more support than I would have thought coming there. Even people who were not sort of politically interested in the Armenian question found photography fascinating. So that being able to use photography as a sort of wedge into people's interest, I think, was important. I wasn't telling the genocide story. I was telling the story of an Armenian family who had deep roots in Turkey, their country, in the Ottoman Empire, who chronicled those experiences. Most of them were not about the genocide, but of course, a central component was what happened to them in 1915 and the years that followed, ultimately until 1922, when at the end of 1922, they were forced to leave Turkey for Greece. So it was a positive experience. I gave talks. I've published things in Turkish, though unfortunately my book that was based on the family story was translated into Turkish. And my last trip to Turkey was in 2019 for the book launch, but that never happened. So, and I think even from 2019, the situation has gotten worse. It's certainly gotten worse for Osman Kavala. He's been, you might be aware, there were judgments by the European Court of Human Rights for him to be released. He hasn't been released. They're currently continuing to demonize him in the country. It's very sad. It pains me. I write to him. He is in many ways a hero in my eyes.
Absolutely. Well, Armen, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you again very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. That went by very quickly. It was a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.